Hello. Thank you for joining me. This is a question and answer session on the last video for Ontology. Usually when I'm in a classroom or I'm working with a student at the library, then I can work with that student and just answer that one question in 5-10 minutes, depending on how complicated the question is, and then that student can go off on their way. However, in a question and answer style session like this, I find that they don't work that well in person. And so I do see that many channels on the internet that they will, specifically on YouTube, they'll point the camera at themselves and they'll talk about answering the questions. But I think that watching a simulation game, something like Oxygen Not Included by Clay here, is actually going to be more interesting. That way, if you're not interested in the question, you can watch me fail at the colony. We also didn't have that many questions. I had a few questions that were addressed from people that saw the video, some over at the school. And I thought that perhaps what I would do is to address those questions, but then I also wanted to address the use of video games in education, because it's going to be a recurrent theme that I have, because it's an interest that I have. So I'm going to get started here on this game. If you're not familiar with this game, I'll put a link down below. I should probably be better at games than I really am, but in actual fact, I never really care that much about winning a game. I'm just more interested in getting to see what you can do in games. There's a couple of games that I finished. Subnautica comes to mind, but in general, I just enjoy the exploration and to find out all the different moving parts and how they work, and Oxygen Not Included has quite a few moving parts in this. If you want to watch somebody who is really good at the game, Grind This Game has he really is pretty decent at the game, and I watch him and I'm like, oh well, that's how he does it, and I wonder if I can do it differently, and the answer sometimes is no. I'll mention other channels that have influenced me or that have nice resources on them for whatever the topic is that we're doing. But in general, if the channel has a lot of cursing on it, I'm not really that interested. And I'm not going to link out to channels that are offensive in any way. This is an educational channel for a broad audience. Now, as we get started here with my initial crew, I have decided they all have a negative and a positive trait, but I have decided that they are all going to be narcoleptic. So I'm going to take narcoleptics, and I don't really care beyond that what they do, which could work out pretty poorly for us. There we go. There's another one, and we'll get one more narcoleptic person here. And then we'll just be kind of the sleepy town. Oops, I missed it. Well, we'll wait for the next one. I was clicking too fast. Yes. Okay, got one. All right. And we'll just name this the sleepy town. I should possibly name this the frustrated town, because this is the third time of my recording. The first time I couldn't get the video, and the next time the video recorded great, but the sound was not there. So we'll see if this one, third time, should be the charm. Now, if you've not seen the game before, essentially in the early game, there's really only two things you really got to pay attention to. That you have to get them to do some work, which is not always the easiest thing, and I'm just going to wipe out all of, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to wipe out this. And you have to pay attention to their oxygen. This is good, and this is bad. This is not so great. And you have to pay attention to the temperature, because I started on a map that has volcanoes on it, so it will heat up pretty rapidly. So eventually I got to get a cooling system in. Green is best. This is warm. And then beyond that it gets into hot. We will also get to test how my multitasking works, because I do not actually know if I can play a game like this. And also talk and answer questions. This could be a challenge right there. I'm pretty sure I can answer the questions. It just might be the talking portion, which we'll have trouble. You know what? We're just going to wipe out those plants. They're in the way. They produce oxygen, and so they're kind of necessary, but they're in the wrong spot, so they're just going to have to go away. And we're going to put it in a sink. We have a little water here, and we're going to put in some plumbing. 1, 2, 3. And typically I like to leave some spot for an art something, and then we'll put in a sink on the other side. Okay, and then while they're doing that, we can address our first point. One of the questions that came up when I was talking to some of the people at school was they wanted to know why I was fixated, I think was their term, but interested in ontology rather than get into the meat of the research. They want to know something, so you look something up. And I thought perhaps we should first address the difference between personal research, academic research, and business research. They're all a little bit different, and while the research methods may be the same, the actual result will frequently be different. So if you were to look at a channel that presents just information, perhaps Joe Scott's Answers with Joe or Dr. Mike's channel, you're going to see that it's generally pretty neutral, and they're really giving academic, they're not necessarily in the school setting, but they're giving academic information. This is the pro to something, this is the con to something, this is what might happen, this is what the facts are, and here's the sources. Or they have expertise that I have researched this out, I've made information available, and so there's actionable information there, but it's presented in a largely neutral fashion. Now, not everybody will believe it's neutral, and I'll come back to that in a moment. And it might be wrong, right? Just because something is neutral does not mean by any means that it is correct. People are human and they make mistakes sometimes. And in general, I find people aren't really too forgiving of mistakes, so I guess I will have that to deal with later. But from a business viewpoint, when I'm researching, it's because I have a product that I want to sell. Now, that product may be a service, but there is something that I want. So when I'm researching a market segment, I'm researching something that's going to help my business. If I find things that are not going to help the business, that can be useful, because sometimes it's good to know what market segments the business is not reaching. But you're looking to to find out not something neutral, but something that is going to have a result-oriented, actionable research that's going to help out the business. Because at the end, the business is looking out for its bottom line. And that's perfectly fine without that. And I read sometimes like, well, that business is just looking to make a profit. Yes, that's what businesses do. And it's not really wrong. We all kind of like money. We like to be paid. So there is a definite bend when you're talking about, or maybe I should say skew is more appropriate, when we're talking about business. Personal research, and I'm a big advocate. I think that going out and doing your own research on a topic is a really positive thing to do. However, it may frequently be a product of a bias. That it's not necessarily what you're not necessarily. Let me rephrase that. There may be, and there always will be, some bias, but there may be bias that is specific because you want to find out a particular thing. We'll talk about on the channel later confirmation bias, which is essentially that you have a bias towards something. We all have biases. If you think you're unbiased, I have bad news for you. But our biases, we may either not be aware of them, or we'll discard information that doesn't fit within our bias. So I'm going to use the example from education of homeschooling versus public schooling, which is if I'm a proponent of one side or the other, I am possibly going to discard that other information so that I get the information that I'm more likely to believe. And it's going to take a lot of information to and a lot of expert opinions in order to change my mind on that. That's not academic research. It sometimes masquerades as academic research, but it's not academic research. So if I start with the premise and I say, I believe that public schooling is better than homeschooling, that's a terrible academic research question. It probably, first of all, won't get published because no peer-reviewed journal will do it, or at least they shouldn't. And the reason for that is, we can get these people to speed up a little bit. Hello. But the reason for that is the conclusion is actually in the question. And we really shouldn't be constructing research with, I start with the conclusion that I'm going to have. Whenever I see somebody who starts with the premise, which is going to be their conclusion, and that's what they're going to research, they're just confirming their bias that they start with. That is confirmation bias. So instead, a better research question would be to say, on this scale that I have found that has been published by other instructors on scoring biology tests from either classroom interactions or homeschool computer interactions, what would be a comparison or a correlation between these scores that might result in something that then I can make a statement and say that biology can be taught better in one venue or another. And that result right there, that longer, more specific question, that's where ontology really becomes more important. When I started my degrees, I did not understand this. So I was going to set out to prove something, and research is not about proving information. It's really about investigating information and then finding something that might be useful, or it might not be useful. Research that quote unquote fails, that you failed to find something, you failed to locate something, doesn't mean it's invalid research. And it might be quite interesting to find. And presenting that information is good. Now, there is a bias in publishing magazines, and I can talk about that later, where they want oftentimes to see that there is an actual result. But that's not true with all magazines. So there's a lot of variety inside of this. I'm thinking that perhaps we should get these people working. I really should make this 4 tiles, but I'm not going to. We might have to change this and re-level the floor later. Give me a moment here before I switch topics. Okay. I want a drain for fresh water that's out here in the environment to get back into here. I want my pump so that I can fill these things, and I need a power system so they can run on these wheels, charge battery, and produce some science here. Okay. So while they're busy working, maybe, and I should set up some bedrooms, so that's what I will be doing next, is we want to change topics over. Someone had asked me what I think is one of the more important skills for people who are entering college and making the transition from high school to college. And they were really talking about in the research domain. There's a lot of things that are important, but one of them specific to the research domain is to realize that the papers that you're assigned that are research papers are typically not research papers. What they actually are is literature reviews. And I wish that personally people were a little more accurate than that, because it gives people a weird idea of research when you're doing a quote-unquote research paper and you're trying to persuade somebody to something, or you do it in a persuasive style. I guess you're doing research in that you're looking up information, but that's not technically research. Research is using an experiment or a interview or surveys, and if you're going to work with some groups, you actually have to be licensed to do that. It's kind of a bigger deal than sometimes it's made into be. I certainly would have liked to know it earlier on, because when I got to the literature review on my own paper, I was like, I don't know how I'm even going to understand and be able to do this. And I didn't realize I'd been doing it for most of my life when I was writing papers. In a perfect world, which we do not have, where I would be in charge, of course, which I am not, I would have everybody who enters college first take a 16-week course in research. How to find facts, how to evaluate facts. People ask me all the time on how you know if this source is real or not, and I'll do a video a little bit later on that. They ask me about the learning process and how does that affect research agendas, and that is an important. Learning process is a tiered system, and it's not that easy to understand. I'm working on a video now, probably air in week 6, but it's like 10 hours long at the moment because I keep putting more and more stuff into it, so I'll have to break it up. Generally, when students come into college, many times they'll enter on that research tree up at the methods level and the tools level, and then they work down the tree. And that seems a little odd. I will tell you that when I did my dissertation, I ended up doing the dissertation essentially backwards. And it caused me no end of confusion and some amount of complaining, because we started with the premise of which methodology did you want to do? And then it was, this is how you're going to do a literature review, and then it was, now pick your research question. That isn't the way professional research works. And so it kind of delivers a strange thing, and then when you get out to the end, and now I'm getting ready for an oral defense, and I have the presentation together, and I have a much better plan because now I've been through all of this. I'm like, wow, I would never do a research paper like this again, and I haven't. I start with the research question, I find the literature review afterwards, and then based on what I find, the literature review and the refining of the research question, I decide, this is the methodology. I pick methodology way out at the end for it. I'm letting these people just do nothing, and that's not so good, because I was busy talking. I don't really need to give them separate bedrooms, so let's do this. Oops. Didn't mean to build a wall. Meant to build a door. Well, I was ready to change topics, but we have a minor issue. Got to get them to sleep. Could put one there, but I think I'm going to save that for some art later. And we'll check here, and we have no narcoleptics, so I'm just going to take whatever these things are. I think they're decorative plants. I probably won't even use them. I'll put them in a container somewhere. I'm going to put this up, and I'm going to put a roof on all of this. And I'm leaving some space because later you can get fire poles and then they can slide up and down. These are very athletic people. I would like to put the farm down below. I'm thinking down here. And then the cooking area across from that. So I'm going to dig out this oxygen plant and this food, and dig out this oxygen plant and this one too. And I'm going to put I'm going to give them a little cooler area so that they can chat about why their colony is failing because their manager is spending time gabbing at work instead of actually, keeping them alive. And I'll put a ladder. No, I can't put a ladder because there's a darn tree in the way. We'll drop that too. And let's just get in that furniture, the water cooler up. Maybe I should actually put the water cooler up here. Yeah, I'll keep all my water together on one level, at least until I get my farms going. All right. I'm also going to drop this down. In this game, your oxygen tends to rise and your carbon dioxide tends to, because it's heavier than oxygen, fall. They did a pretty good job in the game of balancing out an approximation of real-world physics. So we're going to just put this here. Okay, now that they have enough to do, and we can now put our ladder down here. We hardly need it now, but we're going to do it anyway. And then I'm going to gotta get this plant out of the way too. Okay. And then what we can do is move on to the next subject. Now, if you have any questions on the videos, I would really appreciate if you put the comments down, as long as they're respectfully asked. I'll address the comments, or I'll tell you that it's something that we need to discuss at a later time. Let me go research that topic out, which is very appropriate for this channel. This channel doesn't necessarily cover everything in education. I'm not going to talk about high school and junior high necessarily, because I'm not a high school and junior high teacher. I'm a college instructor. So that's really what I'm going to focus on. The other thing is that and sometimes students are surprised, but I'm just going to put it out there, I don't know everything. And I'm always surprised that students would think that I would position myself as if I know everything, because that would be extremely arrogant. And one of the things that I typically hear is that students don't like teachers that are arrogant, yet they still seem to expect teachers to know everything, which is always a little weird to me. So I'll try to address those questions, but this is really a channel based on research agendas in education, academics. We'll touch on business and personal research, more personal research than business research, because I'm a big advocate in people learning on their own, although there is a difference between learning a skill on your own and doing research on your own. We'll cover that later. We'll go for this next. Okay. The other topic that I wanted to cover, and I'm not going to spend too long on it because it's been half an hour so far. Well, 27 minutes. But, no, that's not what I want. This is what I want. Because I need those hydro tiles. And for students that have had me, they're like, yeah, he does this in class too. He's talking about one thing and he loses track and goes off on a tangent. So this is helping that, is my argument for it. Helping me learn how to multitask is 3 articles that were published that had to do with the advantages of playing video games in education. And I want to preface this with one on violence, because I know that it will probably be addressed. You know, there isn't really any evidence that I could find. There have been a couple of papers published on a linkage of violence, but they are older papers, and the methods that they, or rather I should say the methodology that they used, particularly in finding their segment of population, is somewhat questionable. And it has to do with, it's difficult sometimes to do experiments, social experiments in this case, with children. So you end up doing with a particular population of children, which is fine, but it's a problem if you take that population of children and then you generalize it into the general public. It's more, could be a geographical area, it could be a cultural, it could be a medical issue. And one of the researchers that did a lot of work on this, you can find him by the name of Anderson back in the, I want to say, mid-70s, who was finding links for this, was actually the population that he had was from psychology groups. To his credit, he did not generalize it. Other people read his work and said, oh, this segment of people of this age can be generalized to mean everyone. And that's not really the way it works. You need a lot of data on a lot of different segments of populations in order to generalize data. Do some people show violent tendencies? Yes. But some people do not. So that may be more to the person and less to the actual use of video games itself. Squire in 2018 published through Comparative Media Studies Department at MIT in Cambridge a paper titled Video Games in Education. And the part of the paper that I really want to hone in on was simulation models. He had 5 different areas, and I will cover this later on when we get to the different genres of games in education and how it can connect into research. And that is to manipulate, enable, observe, visualize, and compare. If we just take a look at this simulation, this is a pretty simple simulation. It's complicated in getting all the different parts to work. There's a lot of technologies here. There's a lot of different tools that you can use over here. There's a lot of different values. We don't have a lot of this right now. I haven't put in any lights. I haven't put in any plumbing. Actually, that's the material panel. The plumbing is here. So there's a lot of stuff that's missing here, and the colony will grow or it will die. It could do that too. But simulations are a pretty pain-free way of being able to explore and observe and experience a situation. Right? So to manipulate is this, the ability to manipulate and move things. I can't directly manipulate these people. I mean, yes, I can click on them and I can move them to a location, but that doesn't mean they'll do the work. The best I can do is try to coax them to do some work. And there's quite a few funny videos out there of these people that do not do the work. It's kind of like real life. You can lead them, but you can't make them drink. And so you get this ability to manipulate an environment. This is my own environment that I get to play around in. You get to enable. Enable, you get to build pretty much whatever you want. When I first started this series, I was asking, I wonder if you can build a vertical farm, because I've been reading about vertical farms and I'd really like to do a vertical farm. And it's really not a question anymore, because yes, you can do it. Because I had so many problems in the recording of this particular one that I already answered that question. I think we'll put it there. So therefore, it enables me, in this case, to play a simulation, and I'm going to get to run through and design a vertical farm of my own choice. Now, it works in the short term. Whether it works in the long term, I don't know. I also get to assign skills. Do I assign a skill that they're going to get a morale bonus in, or one that I just basically need? And I'm going to have this guy dig, because I need some digging. I got a lot of digging to do. I also want to clear up some of my other panels so that some of this stuff goes away. I like to keep my interface kind of free. Okay, but I do like being told this, and I do have an oxygen problem that will begin if I don't get it fixed. So there is that little problem there. I don't really need that right now. What I really need is research done. So you're going to start doing research, hopefully. As you get more experienced with a game like this, you'll start to realize that there's a number of similarities between different games. Same as people who play platformers often on YouTube. One of the first things they'll see they do, can I double jump? Or do I have to learn that skill? How do I move the stuff? The more you get to do something within a genre, the more you'll start transferring that to other parts of either a similar domain, video games, or maybe either parts of your life. There's also the ability to observe, be able to watch for this, and see this is how they're going to react in a certain environment to certain things. Or just observe and watch and check what's going on. I have an unreachable dig, hopefully, because otherwise they could get stranded up there. No, they've made it unreachable. That's good. I'll fix that when I get some hydro tiles. And you also have the ability to visualize. There is no farm right here. I'm going to put a farm here. That means I have to have visualized it in my head while I was chatting, and also be able to then build it based on what I think it should look like. And that can be a useful skill to have. There's also the ability to compare. Is this farm going to work out better than other farms? One problem I'm going to have with this farm is I don't have much water. I've been looking around, and there is not, a little bit here, there's not much water. And so, and I need a farm because I need to get these oxygen plants going. So I'm going to have to compare, is this part more successful than farms that I've run in the past? So we'll see. I also have somebody who has a new skill. You know, getting artwork good early would be nice, but it's not the most important thing. I think we're going to put farming in most important thing. Because the farmers, without the farmers, we don't eat. I kind of need those farmers. So we'll get that done. All right. A different paper, and I will try not to mangle these names too badly, was put out by Kuhn, Gleisch, Lorenz, Lindenberger, and Gallinat in 2014. It has a longish title of Playing Super Mario Induces Structural Brain Plasticity, Gray Matter Changes Resulting from Training with a Commercial Video Game. That was published in Molecular Psychiatry in 2014. When I first read it, the first thing I thought was, man, RT Gamer, who does a lot of Mario Kart and Super Mario Brothers on his channel, must have great adaptation skills. But what the article actually talks about is that they did real-world experiments between a control group and a group playing a commercial video game, in this case Super Mario, and they found that there were indications, not proof. That's a different deal. I'll talk about that next week. There were indications that playing video games might help people learn to adapt, because the plasticity in your brain, the gray matter, as we age, that hardens. We do not have narcoleptics, so I'm going to take this thing. I guess that's useful for those of you who are younger and you want to say to your elders and say, you know, you're just so set in your ways. And that's true to a certain extent from medical. We tend to become, our brain, the gray matter in our brain tends to thin and harden as we age. It's part of the aging process, and it makes us a little less adaptable. It makes us a little less likely to learn. Children can pick up, for example, a language very quickly. Oops. But adults may struggle more with it, and that doesn't happen with everyone. Some people may retain that plasticity for a long time, and that comes back to generalizing. I'll read comments sometimes where they'll say, somebody will say, well, adults can't learn as fast as children. And somebody else will post a comment and say, well, I learned faster than my kids. And I sit there and think, what kind of proof is that? That could be your kids are learning slow. It could be that your kids are learning at normal speed and you're a really fast learner. It could be that you're just making it up and you're a really slow learner and feeling bad about it. Because in general, I do research pretty much as a living, and I don't really have to tell people that I learn fast. They know that from what I do. I don't usually have to tell people that I'm intelligent. They know that from what I do. So I'm always a little suspicious when somebody tells me that they're really good at something. And it is important to tell people what you're good at, but if you harp on it, I start to have some questions. It appears that playing video games may stimulate the brain in such a way that it's going to react favorably and want to adapt to something you're doing. And does that cross over into other games, paper and pen RPGs, into crossword puzzles? I don't really know that answer. There's some indications that at least in crossword puzzles and in board games that is something that is good, even if only in the social aspects for aging populations. But I wouldn't want to characterize this particular study and say, well, that proves that playing video games increases brain plasticity, because that's not the way it works. Science, at least Western science, is done by consensus, that there has to be a body of people that agree. And there's always going to be outliers. There are always going to be somebody that went down a different research path. They're not necessarily doing it on purpose or to prove a case, but they just followed a different research path and they disagree. That's perfectly fine. It's when they disagree with an agenda that I might start to have a problem. And students who have had me before in classes will know this. And they'll be like, oh yes, he'll talk about that. There was also a study done by, and I hope I get these names close, Rossar, Lynch, Cuddity, Gentile, Klonsky, Merrel. It was done by Arch Surgery and in 2007, and it is the impact of video games on training surgeons in the 21st century. To be a surgeon, if you're not aware, you have to have a lot of fine motor movement. And so the researchers wanted to see if there was using other things that require fine motor movement. In this case, a first-person shooter video game, I think they used Top Gun, is if that was a solution, and they found that there is some correlation. So remember back up with Squire's work on enabling, observing, and visualizing, where you can transfer those skills within a domain. That might be furthered, although because of the timeline it would be more that Squires furthers the Arch Surgery, that you can transfer skills from video games across domains. You learn things in a video game that you can use for other purposes. Personally, I'm not sure I really believe in a mindless video game, because being able to click and drag and being able to select is something that I see students struggle with sometimes if they're not familiar with computers. It's the reason that solitaire used to be on the Windows. And I taught at a school where I was teaching students who were not really conversant with computers. That's not their fault. They didn't have those opportunities. And so they were not very good at selecting. And when you get into complicated programs, I taught 3ds Max for close to 12 years. When you get into complicated 3D applications or Photoshop, which has multiple tools buried under it, or Illustrator, and that pen tool drives me crazy in Illustrator, being able to select finally where you want to go is important. So there's certainly some potential overlap, I should say. Now, do sometimes people play it too much? Yes. You can become addicted to anything. You can become addicted to cell phones. You can become addicted to playing video games. You can become addicted to cigarettes and alcohol. And I'm not a medical professional. I'm not going to tell you which one is better or worse, because any sort of an addiction like that can really cause some harm into your life. Which one's more serious or not, I'll leave that to, someone who's in the medical field and can answer that question. I think my hydro tiles are done. So here's my plan. I'm going to set up, I want them to do my plumbing, because I will need that. And I'm going to set up my hydro tiles, and then I'm going to finish this particular recording. Okay. We're going to put up another one here and another one here. Now they technically only have to be 2 high, but I think I'm going to put another row in over here. Oh, not there, however. Don't build it yet. And I want it high enough that I can bring my trees down into here so that I can keep everything in one area for the plumbing. I'd prefer not to have a super complicated plumbing grid for it. Oops, I did it again. Not this, not that. Okay. All right, and then that means we actually have to dig out this as well. I'm going to leave that where it is, although I'll probably lose it. Okay. So while they're busy working on their farm so that they can eat, oh, you know what? I realized I can't do this way because I need my carbon dioxide down on this bottom level. I don't want it pooling here, so I'm going to cap that off, and we'll use a different route to get down at this food. We'll come down on the side somewhere. So while they're busy, I don't know, doing something. No, I don't want that there anyway, do I? Well, build down here. I need them to build down here. Otherwise, it will be a short series. Okay. So, I just kind of want to wrap things up with a couple of comments, and then you can decide, what you make of them. First of all, if you leave any comments, that would always be helpful, because then I'll have more specific questions to answer. If this doesn't work for you, let me know. I'll try it. You can let me go too. I don't mind. And you can let me know, and we'll figure out a different way of doing it. Not everything is going to be done in Photoshop. The next one is, and then I believe the one after that's After Effects. I like to present material in different ways, and sometimes there's going to be a lot of overlap between the material because I don't know if you're the first person getting it or if you need to hear it many times. And typically, by the way, we need to hear something 3 to 5 times in different ways in order to be able to understand things. And I'll talk about memory and its functions when I get into the learning domains. So there's certainly, they're going to end up getting killed down here in the bad oxygen. So there's certainly enough that can be talked about. If you would prefer to just watch the game, you can either go over to one of the channels that they dedicate themselves to games, or you can simply turn off the sound for that. I turned the music far down on this because I wanted to talk and it was annoying, but I left the sound effects because I like them. So it gives you little options. If you have trouble with the volume or the video, let me know. I'm pretty new to the recording part. So while I did recording for other things, movies and stuff like that, when I was teaching it, well, sadly, I was teaching before YouTube was a thing. I actually remember when computers, there was a big debate whether computers were going to work or not, and they had the old punch cards. So sometimes I feel like, really, because I've heard students talk at school and they're like, it takes so long to load something, and I'm like, I played Frogger off a tape cassette. We could go to the mall, go shopping for a couple hours, come back, and still be loading on the Atari. So there's so this part of it is pretty new to me, getting it posted up onto YouTube. And so if there's it's usually the codecs. So if you're having some sort of he's narcoleptic. I wanted the food, but I'm going to take this. And I planned for a bed, so we're okay. But I don't have compost. Well, we'll deal with the plumbing and the compost next. Next time we meet. You can become a cook. I don't care. See, here's my farmer. Oh, well. And until then, I'll see you next week. Take care, and goodbye.